I know I'm getting older because I used to spring up steps like that, and now I just kind of casually meander. I'm not being cool. That's just the best speed I can do. I don't do that graciously because I'm getting older with great gratitude since the other options are not that good. But I'm not doing it very gracefully at times. I'm Burns Brady, and I'm an alcoholic. Hi, everybody. Appreciate being asked to be up here. I've kind of grown up with some of you people. And some of you have labored through a number of my talks, and as time has gone along, I've seen y'all get better, and y'all have seen me get better. And that's been real good, because that's what you expect in Alcoholics Anonymous. Most of the process of recovery is not a linear line. It's the different plateaus. And we've gone through some of these plateaus together. I remember when some of y'all were goofier than a goat. And y'all can, I can tell you that there's some of y'all out there saying you remember when I was goofier than a goat, and maybe you haven't heard me since my last talk, and the last time we met you thought I was still goofy as a goat, and that's okay, because in Alcoholics Anonymous there's no line that says goofy people can't stay, and it's real nice that it says that. It doesn't say that. I've never really doubted I'm an alcoholic since I got in Alcoholics Anonymous. But I got to tell you that I had complete affirmation of that today during Peggy's talk, because I'd met Peggy last night, and I met her before, and this was a wonderful conversation that we'd had, and a wonderful, just two people that were genuinely liked each other, and we would talk. But I never heard her talk, never heard her Al-Anon talk. And I once heard a guy give an AA talk, and he said he knew why he and his wife got along, because the rocks in her head fit the holes in his. And when she got to talking, the longer she talked, the hotter I got. And I knew that I was an alcoholic, because this woman was a dyed-in-the-wool Al-Anon, and I was really attracted to her. And I thought, my God, that's it. I mean, hell, I don't need no other definition of being an alcoholic. That's it. It's been a good day. I've really enjoyed all the speakers. Each has brought something. Each speaker always does bring something to me if I listen. And I've gotten better about listening. I really have gotten better about listening. I'm really grateful for a lot of things. I have felt not a threat that Alcoholics Anonymous is threatened, but I have sensed a number of challenges that we're simply going to have to deal with, and I have no doubt that we will. But interestingly enough, it won't be decided in New York. It'll be decided by each individual working with another individual, studying the big book and sharing their experience, strength, and hope. And as long as we maintain that integrity, everything will be fine. Bill Wilson, in his last talk, if you ever look at it, and you'll usually see these on the walls in some of our AA Al-Anon clubs, which says, you see Dr. Bob's and you see Bill's last talk. And in his last talk, which he actually was too sick to give, he says two things. One is that anonymity, he was absolutely convinced anonymity was more important than he even realized originally. The other thing he said was AA must and will change. And the responsibility that each of us has is to maintain the integrity of the principles and to continue to recognize the multiple challenges. I was at a conference about a month ago, and one guy was telling me about his sponsor when he came in about 5 years ago. And he wouldn't sponsor anybody if they were under 40 years of age, because he said nobody under 40 needed to be in AA. They hadn't been sick enough. They hadn't had enough whiskey. And I'm sitting there thinking, well, that's interesting. And I've often wished that Bill Wilson were still alive, wished both he and Bob were, but Bill Wilson especially, because I think he would deal with so many things that he wrote so much about that today he would probably revise. Not the big book, not multiple things, but I think he would explain in more detail. Because as we've learned more and more about alcoholism, we realize that if it weren't for some of the things that we realize today, Eric wouldn't be here. 18-year-old kid, an alcoholic? Are you shitting me? Both my kids would be dead because they were screaming drunks by the time they were 12. Libby got in the program when she was 20. Burns got in when he was 16. I work as some of y'all don't know, and I'm sure it's not particularly important, but I'm a doctor. May not impress you every now and then. It impresses me. I mean, if you don't think they're miracles, my being a doctor is really one of them. I stopped and think, as the old joke goes, there was a time I couldn't spell it, now R1, and that's amazing. But because of that, it's given me some opportunities to go into places with the knowledge we have today that Dr. Silkworth talked about with the physical allergy and mental obsession, and to carry that message with more development, not any different, but with more development into places. And one of the positions I'm in today is as the, quote, addictionist for a men's homeless shelter. And we sleep 200 men a night. We've got 100 of those men in a year-long recovery process. And we use the recovery dynamics that Peggy referred to that originally came from Joe M. out of Little Rock. And what we do is we actually teach them, they actually study the book every day for 6 months. And then every night they go to meetings. And I've been privileged to do probably 30 or 40 fifth steps over the past 2 or 3 years with these men. And I don't know there's anything I'm more grateful for today than that, because what they've done is absolutely stamped within me what my knowledge has been revealing for some time, and that is that there's a whole different set of alcoholics than the alcoholic who got sober when Bill Wilson and that bunch got sober. That's one form of alcoholism. The other form is this form like Eric has. And these kids are drunk from the first time they drink. And they're little animals. Each one of those men in that healing place that I've done fifth steps with were all drinking before they were 10. And we're all in prison, or 90% of them were in prison before they were literally, as soon as they were old enough to go. And they were all called antisocial personality disorders. They said, and they all said, these people can't be treated. Out of this bunch will come serial killers and the people who really will never be able to walk the streets. And I'm a son of a bitch if there aren't 300 of those guys still sober after 3 years. And not one of them's an antisocial personality disorder. They're all drunks. They just started drinking back before they were old enough to be alcoholic. Except for one thing, they have this incredible allergy to alcohol. And I'm deeply grateful that we are opening our arms to what I call the women and the children. I'm probably going to wander around a little bit today. That's fine. I don't know whether I'm old enough to really have that liberty or freedom, but I'm not sure exactly where I'm going, but that's okay. I feel good about it because y'all are probably going to go with me and have a good time. And when it's over, not any of you are going to judge me. But I've been really, and I'm not leaving Mary Jane out for sure, because Mary Jane and I have known each other for some time, and that was just delightful, her talk, so I don't want to leave that out. Because I'll tell you one thing that you said that really got me. I find humor in all of our talks, and there's a lot of humor in yours, but when you said going in a mental hospital, you always had to know who the president was. And I remember thinking, God, I spent months in mental hospitals, and my problem was I would always get close, but I never got it right. They always kept me. I thought, my God, that's why I never got out. I always missed it. I just got close, But anyway, a lot of other good stuff in there. But I've been thinking a lot lately about what is. I really would like to think that my talk that I'm doing today is for the newcomer and for the person who's been around for a while who can't figure out why in the hell 2 and 2's making 7. And I'm really very much keyed into that. What is the message that is my responsibility to give to these people? Is it my experience? I hear a lot of talk today from speakers who give their experience, and they draw conclusions that basically are just their conclusions, and they say it from the podium as though it were the truth, just because it's their experience. And as a newcomer sitting out there, they're getting some real crazy stuff. And see, I have an option to do this, because when I came in the program, I came in what I call the dark ages of AA in Louisville. I came in December 1st, 1977. That's what I call the dark ages of AA in Louisville. And there was a huge section of Louisville at that time where the message was, when you came into AA, was don't drink, go to meetings, get a sponsor, tell him everything that's wrong with you. He'll tell you what to do, and then go save a drunk. Everybody's happy. They left out that middle part. And for about 9 years, I was what I call a lethal weapon for God. I mean, tell you, I was all over Louisville, and there are two things kept me sober during that time, and one of them was that alcohol whipped me. I mean, it whipped me bad. When I came into AA, it didn't work. That was where I was really powerless over alcohol. It wasn't I was powerless because I drank it when I didn't want to. I was more powerless because I drank it when I had to, and it didn't work. I mean, alcohol quit working, so for me to go back out and drink would have been an absolute exercise in futility because it didn't work. So staying sober was not that difficult because it was not remedy the noise. The other reason I think I stayed sober was because I ran around everywhere I could find a drunk and tried to drag them off somewhere to see if I could help get them sober. And it kept me from wallowing in my own crap, you know. Hell, it got to be, you say, here comes Burns Brady. If you haven't had a beer, drink one because he's taking you off treatment. I don't give a damn whether you need to go or not. The thing that I noticed was that most of those people that I dragged off after about 2 or 3 years went off and left me. And I got to looking at that, and I wasn't sure what all that was all about. Well, what I've come to know over the years is they were leaving me because I was too crazy to stay around. I was in a meeting not too long ago, and there was a fella in the meeting, and somebody, they were talking about resentments, and this guy raised his hand, been sober about 12, 14 years, and he said, I'll tell you how I deal with resentments. He said, when I have a resentment, said I go out in the backyard and I've got a big oak tree and I run around that oak tree and I run around that oak tree and I run around that oak tree and pretty soon I get so damn tired I just fall down and the resentment's gone. I go in and I go to bed and it feels better. What happens next day? I get up and there it is again. What do you do? I go out and I get around that oak tree and I run around that oak tree. I thought that son of a bitch gonna kill himself running around that oak tree, you know? I was in another meeting, I heard this guy say, yeah, I'll tell you what I do when I have resentments. I write down everything I hate about this person. I just write it all down. I hate you for doing it, and then I mail it to him. And said, I just feel better. And I thought the newcomer back there has now figured out what to do with resentments. That is, write a hate letter and run around an oak tree. By God, he's got it nailed, you know? Or people listening to me for the first 9 years would have said, well, what you got to do is quit drinking, get a sponsor, tell him everything you do, and he'll tell you what to do, and then go save a drunk. And even if they didn't get drunk, they were just like me. They were walking sideways, you know? Finally, at 9 years in this program, I lived the first 9 years in this program on a 3 1/3 step. The first 3 steps were not hard for me. I was powerless over alcohol. My life at that time was truly unmanageable. It'd take a power greater than me to restore me to sanity, and I'd turn my life, my will over. Now, that 3rd step was a little tough, not because I wanted to avoid it, not because I tried to analyze it, but I'll tell you, I was very, very sick, toxic sick from all the whiskey I had to drink for almost a year and a half. And the 3rd step is an abstract concept. And I would look at that, and drunks can't think abstractly for about 2 years. Not when you drink as much whiskey as I drank. You may be able to think about what's the front part of your underwear and what's the back and where is the ignition in the car, but to think abstractly is not possible. So I finally just had to back up and remember my days in the Baptist church in western Kentucky, as I'd sit there, a little 5-year-old in Sunday school kindergarten, rocking in that swing, and they'd say, God is love. And so the 3rd step for me became God is love. And I would just chant that sometime during the day. God is love, God is love, God is love. And today I still chant it because it's absolutely true. If there's a word that's synonymous with Alcoholics Anonymous, it's love. When we talk about the spirituality, we're talking about the love, at least for me. And the love that I came to know was the God of love. And you represented that God of love. You were the God with skin on him. You were the God that I could touch and hold, and you could put my head in your lap and let me cry, and God is love. But I had the 3 1/3 step program, and I had a 1/3 of the 12th step, which was go save a drunk. At 9 years in this program, I was driven literally to my knees by a series of self-centered acts that even I could no longer tolerate. Knew that whiskey was not an option for me because it didn't work, and had to go to the next level. And when the student's ready, the teacher has always arrived in this program for everybody I've ever worked with, and certainly for me. And this little pigeon that I was sponsoring that had about 7 months of sobriety gave me these 8 tapes and said, listen to them and see if they're any good, so I'll know whether I should listen to them. And as I listened to those tapes, they were Joe and Charlie's tapes of the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. And as I listened, I just sobbed through the whole deal because I realized that there was another whole program out there. Copies of those tapes were made by me, and 12 of us got together, and we began to read and do and study and listen to those tapes and coordinate them and work together to go to the next level of surrender and have an insight into what is the process to deal with the thinking so that I don't have to go back to the drinking. And a whole new world opened. And for that newcomer or anybody maybe with 15 or 20 years of sobriety, I've had many of them call me after I've talked and said, my God, please tell me what it is. I am nuts. And I've been sober 25 years. The last 10 years I was in practice. I practiced family medicine for 25 years. I left in 1992 to direct the impaired physician program for the state of Kentucky. But for those 25 years, I saw about everything there is to see in diseases endemic to this part of the country. And in the last 10 years of my practice, and certainly the last 5, I was highly effective as a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I guess every drunk in Louisville that I know that really was serious about staying sober, if they had a medical problem, came to me because they came to know that many times just through ignorance, they couldn't trust every doctor. But I guess I don't know how many drunks that would come into me with depression, with anywhere from 3 months of sobriety to 30 years of sobriety. And as I would walk through with some of these older people in sobriety, what I realized is they didn't have a program. They just went to meetings. And they were miserable. Not as miserable as if they didn't go to meetings, because at least they had some place to go sit where they didn't feel miserable alone. You know? And I would sit there and I was absolutely amazed. When I read this book and did what it said, a whole new world opened. And one of the first things that I noted in this book was what seemed to me almost heresy, because this book told me that my problem wasn't alcohol. I thought, wait a minute, you don't understand. I was in a mental hospital 4 times, divorced, kicked out of medical school, and give you the whole list of things you want, and you're telling me that's not my problem? Now, if there's anybody that just walked in, let me tell you, if you're an alcoholic of my type, if you ever think that you can drink alcohol again, then you're playing 2 sandwiches short of a picnic, and I need to clear that up, okay? Because what I can do is I can write this whole wall full of formulas that says nothing more than Silkworth said about a physical allergy and mental obsession. It's fascinating stuff, and I've learned to do it for doctors so that I can teach them how to treat us. And I've done some tapes if you want to listen to them, and it may open up some of your minds. If you're really wondering, am I just a bad piece of crap or am I a sick alcoholic? Well, you're a sick alcoholic with a huge amount of responsibility to get over that stuff. But I want to be sure you hear this real clear. If you're an alcoholic of my type, you will not ever be able to drink alcohol again successfully if you ever did. But if you're an alcoholic of my type, if this book means anything to you, and it means a lot to me, your problem's not alcohol. Alcohol caused me problems, but it's not my problem. My problem is my mind. It's the way I think. See, those people out there, those straight, normal people, they think we're weird. Well, according to their standards, we are weird. Because they can take a certain set of circumstances and react a certain way. You give us the same set of circumstances, and you're not really sure what the hell we're going to do. You know? If you're drunk like me, maybe not all of y'all that way. I said one time in Little Rock, I said, I'm sure it never happened to you that way. And there was a little girl sitting over here, and she said, shit. Well, as I read through the book and I'm looking at this thing about my mind, Wilson talks about a peculiar mental twist, the thinking that precedes the drinking. But he never really enlarges in paragraph or sentence form exactly what that means. And see, that was very important to me. When I came in this program, I would sit in a meeting where someone had relapsed. And someone would say, why did he take a drink? And somebody back on the back row that was real wise say, cause he's an alcoholic. Cause he's an alcoholic. And I thought, well, hell, I'm an alcoholic. He's an alcoholic. Alcoholics drink. That means I've got to drink sometime. Oh, God, I don't want to drink, you know. But I was so black and white in my thinking that if he's an alcoholic and he relapsed and alcoholics drink, then I'm an alcoholic. That means when's my time? I used to drive down the streets of Louisville, 42-year-old physician, pulling up to a stoplight, and the light would be red, and I thought, I bet when it turns green, I'm going to be drunk. And I would walk into meetings, and I'm saying, I'm scared I'm going to get struck drunk. And everybody go, ha, 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 ha. I said, you some bitches don't understand. When's my time, you know? Because I really felt that way. I'm going to get struck drunk. The peculiar mental twist. And when someone in a meeting says he drinks because he's an alcoholic, there's a lot of stuff behind that, but I've never heard anybody really develop it. And I think it's real critical for me to talk about what is the peculiar mental twist. What is the way this drunk thinks? And I've been with y'all 19 years almost, and the ones I've been privileged to work with and have been taken the privilege to work with me, because that is their privilege, not just because it's me, but to stay sober. The thinking is the same. I was down in down in eastern Texas, and I heard a joke that absolutely typifies the alcoholic thinking. The alcoholic thinking. Fellow that was the voice of the conference was about 85 years old, been sober about 45 years at that time, and he talked like he had a flat brainwave. But if you get out on the front row and listen to Damon, this sucker was right on target. And he tells this wonderful story. He said there was this fellow who was a traveling salesman in East Texas, and he would check into a motel, stay a week, go to the next motel and stay a week, and he's what we call in Western Kentucky bad to drink. So he'd go get drunk that night, he'd go out and he'd get drunk, and he'd come back, and they'd always set him up like they set him up because they wanted to keep his business. Well, one of these days he had that situation like Eric talked about the skunk and the cat. You know, he'd had about all this he could tolerate. So he goes home and gets into AA and comes back again, this time sober and cleaned up and ready to go. They don't know this. He starts circuit riding again, doing his salesman work, checks into the motel the first night. He goes out to an AA meeting. They think he's going out to get drunk because he always does. He comes back from the meeting, switches on the light, and they've got him all set up like they normally do, opens the door, switches on the light. And there beside the bed is this big tub of ice and a big fifth of whiskey. And on the foot of the bed sat these two beautiful women. And he looks at this scene for me and he said, I've started going to AA and I've asked them what I got to do to stay sober and be happy. And they told me I had to quit drinking and change everything I'm doing. He said, so I can't drink that whiskey. And one of you girls is going to have to leave. That's a 9. I told that story somewhere. See, that's the alcoholic way of thinking. I told that story somewhere one time, and this girl came up to me after I'd finished on. She said, I hated that joke. That was a chauvinistic joke. And I said, honey, they're all chauvinistic jokes when we get here because we're all chauvinists. Give us time. We're going to work through it. But if we knew how to deal with women, if we knew how to deal with anybody, but we sure as hell don't know how to deal with women. I said, but that's a chauvinistic joke. It's not meant to be. It just works out that way. But it tells what the alcoholic does about his thinking, See, he was going to live by a different set of rules. And one of the peculiarities of my thinking is I believe I can live by a different set of rules. If it's a 65 mile an hour speed zone, I'll drive 95 because I'm Burns Brady. If it's a handicapped parking spot, I'll jump in there real quick because I'm only going to run in for 1 minute because I'm Burns Brady. A different set of rules. And let me tell you what, for the newcomer that I'm talking to out there, if you walked in this organization and you think there aren't rules and we're going to candy ash you by telling you there's some real neat little suggestions we got for you, Bill Wilson brokered that deal. He brokered the suggestions so he could say directions everywhere else in the book. And Silkworth says in his story, if these men follow simple rules, and the rules absolutely fit for me, and every time I've tried to break them, one day at a time, it's burned my butt. But I always have to deal with that series of thinking that says I'm a little bit different. David, you need 12 steps every single day. I need them, but I can get away with 11. Because it's not the same one I drop every day. I drop the one that I'm too tired to do. Like I won't close my night tonight with the 11th step because I'm tired. I won't take the time to inventory the day. Or this morning I'm a little bit late and I've got to get to where it is I'm going to get, and I'm not going to sit down and do that 11th step, 3rd step, 7th step prayer for opening and to sit and pray for my God to give me tolerance and patience and tolerance and love, because I have to work on that. Book's full of it. For me, you mean it, because I can get intolerant of a light changing color, much less you in the front of me are beeping your horn behind me. About 4 months ago, I was depressed. I really relate to Bill Wilson, his cyclical depressions. And for those of you who've ever spent the time studying Bill Wilson, you realize that Wilson cycled when he wasn't working the program. And that's an incredible thing to realize, but that's exactly what happened to the man. Now, I got to tell you, if he were alive today, somebody would be trying to put him on Prozac. I have no doubt about that. And I'm not saying anything bad about Prozac. I'm not even saying whether he needed it. I'm just telling you he would sure as hell be offered it. But then so would Jesus. But it's the same thing. Because Jesus isolated, spent 40 days alone, did all these crazy things, and he was obviously suffering from a major depression, so he would have been on Prozac. But I'm not. If anybody's taking Prozac, if you think I'm making fun of you, I'm not, because there are people who need to be on Prozac. There are also a hell of a lot of people on Prozac who don't need to be on Prozac. And for those of us who know this deal, we know that's true. And it's unfortunate, and we'll work through it eventually as God gives us more direction. But I was at home depressed. And when I get depressed, I get a bunker mentality. I pull everything down just like this. And I just get like this, and I want you away from me. Now, it used to be because I didn't want you to threaten me. Now I want you away from me because I'll hurt you. And I don't want to hurt you. Eric, what you said today, I didn't want to hurt anybody else anymore. And it usually lasts about 2 or 3 days, and I get just like this. And I mean, my sponsor, everybody knows, leave him alone. He's nuts. And at that point in time, I'm not, you say, well, if you do this, if you do that, well, maybe so, but it's just like this. So I don't hurt you, and people leave me alone. And I was depressed, and Casey came over and sat on the bed, and those of you who met my wife know what a wonderful, delightful lady she is. She's in AA, and she came and sat on the bed beside me, and she knows how much I love her and respect her. And she said, Burns, she said, this hurts me so much I have to say it. I love you so much, and to see you in this much pain, I just need to say this. She said, you've gotten bigger than the program. And see, this astounded me, because if you walk with me on a daily basis, what you will find is exactly an individual totally committed to this program and every concept of it and every principle of it and everything that needs to be done for me to stay sober and to be ready when you're ready to try to get sober. That's exactly what it is. For me to fit myself to be of maximum service to you and my God, that's the whole deal for me. Outlined beautifully for me. And I looked at her in absolute amazement, and I said, I don't understand. She said, Burns, you haven't called your sponsor in 6 months. I didn't even realize it. Bigger than the rules. When she left, I dropped down on my knees, and I said, God, why haven't I called him? And I realized I hadn't called him because it was time for me to move in another direction. And instead of taking care of it, I just didn't. So the next day I called both my new sponsor and my old sponsor and told them what the situation was. And I meet every Tuesday with my new sponsor. Man came in the program the same time I did. We meet every Tuesday and we talk. And my life has changed significantly in those 4 months, because now I'm between the curbs with the rules. Wilson knew that talking about this part of the peculiar mental twist of being bigger than the rules we might understand, so he called it self-centeredness. In our beautiful book, this is what he calls self-centeredness. I'm talking to a man right now that's working in the impaired physician program that we monitor and advocate for, and he is absolutely committed to this program. We get the record of their meetings in each month so that I can look at those. And as I studied it, last month he went to 4 meetings a week. This month he went to 2. And I called him and I said, Jim, what's the deal? He said, well, 2 of those are speaker meetings. I'm just not getting anything out of it. And I just decided to quit. I said, who'd you check on that? Who'd you talk to? He said, well, nobody. I said, did you pray about it? He said, well, no. Now, he's really not feeling any pain. But we know it's just a matter of time, isn't it? I don't know whether he needs to go to 2 meetings or 4 meetings, but I know damn well that what he didn't do was have enough humility to work the process. And I listened to it over and over and over. And I do it now. Thank God I've surrounded myself with people who will come to me and say, in case when I'm really in my bunker, send me a message, you're on fire. Second part of the peculiar mental twist is what I call victimization. If it weren't for them, this wouldn't be happening. And starting back in my childhood, when I was drinking, I would go back to my childhood and I'd say, well, you drink too if you were born poor. I mean, I couldn't belong to the country club. I had to caddy. I remember I'd say I walked down those fairways and I had a bag on one guy's on my shoulder and a bag on another guy on their shoulder, and we'd walk by the swimming pool and I'd see their little kids diving off in the pool, and I'd say, oh, little pricks, and I'd carry those things down there thinking that. And I mean, that's just the way I felt. And you'd drink too if you had to work your way through college. You'd drink too if no Brady had ever been to college, couldn't tell you how to work with fraternities. You'd drink too if they didn't do this. Victimization. Everybody else's fault. Wasn't my fault. I did the only thing you could do with those set of circumstances. It was their fault. Wilson knew that we probably wouldn't understand victimization, so he called it resentment. Resentment. Every core feeling around a victimization set of circumstances is resentment. Yes, it's an excuse. But how many fifth steps have you listened to, or look at your own, or fourth steps on your own, or listen, how many fifth steps have you listened to when you got somebody going down and they're listing their resentments? Every single one of them are, I was a victim. I don't have any problem at all with the adult children movement as long as it's used as a therapeutic modality when people have a spiritual foundation. I have a hell of a problem with it when I'm listening to somebody staying drunk because their adult child insight let them justify their resentments and victimization and live in the problem rather than moving on to the solution. Because if there's one thing I just absolutely hate, and it's the thing I've had to have more help with than I guess anything else, it's to be able to accept the drunk who dies drinking. In the last month, I've had 4 friends with 15 to 20 years sobriety who got drunk. It didn't take a rocket scientist to sit down and figure out why they got drunk. It was the peculiar mental twist and these parts that I'm talking about for me. Maybe this doesn't work for you. The third part of the peculiar mental twist is what I call the square peg, round hole, bigger hammer syndrome. If I can't make the square peg fit in the round hole, I just get a bigger hammer and beat that SOB to death till it fits. You know, I remember when I was locked on the horns of that dilemma at 9 years in recovery, and I mean got down to doing the things that I should have been doing a long time before, and God gave me this because I said to God one time after I finally saw the light, I said, God, I know you got all this power, and I know you got all this insight, and I know you got this great game plan, but if you just give me one small clue why you left my ass out there hanging for 9 years, I'd sure like to know. And I felt this voice say, son, you may learn a lot and you may teach a lot, but you'll only heal people or give them the opportunity to heal with your experience. And I'm giving you some incredible experience. Tell them what it's like. Tell them what it's like. Square peg, round hole, bigger hammer syndrome. Make it fit, make it fit, make it fit, make it fit. Why? Because of my fear of not being able to manage the outcome. Wilson called it fear. Second half of the first step, the unmanageability of life. Almost no alcoholic I've ever been privileged to deal with that ever walked in an AA meeting. Let me tell you, the diagnosis of alcoholism can be made from the minute you walk in an AA meeting. I don't know if you're going to get sober for another 30 or 40 years, but if you walked in an AA meeting, you're drunk. And that's even on one of the things that we use for the diagnosis of alcoholism, that we as physicians use. We have these wonderful tests. And there's one that's a 25-question test. And you get 5 points for each question. Some of them are 4, some of them are 3. All you have to have is 5 points to be an alcoholic. And these are medical. I mean, this is really medical stuff. And you get 5 points if you've ever walked into an AA meeting. I thought, my God, we're the rocket scientists. That means that almost every alcoholic that I've ever worked with does not have a bit of problem knowing that they're powerless over alcohol, but they don't get drunk over that. They get drunk over trying to manage life. My most miserable times have been trying to manage life, trying to control the outcome, absolutely obsessed with trying to control the outcome, and all the pain that goes through all the manipulation. And Wilson said fear, self-centeredness, resentment, and fear. So he did spell out the peculiar mental twist. I just didn't know what it meant in my life. And today, when I won't live by the rules and when I'm absolutely about 8 years ago, I decided that my wife wasn't doing what I wanted her to do, and there was only one obvious solution to that, and that's get another woman. Every alcoholic takes hostages. And my biggest hostage was my wife, and I had her right here on my hip. I was a benevolent dictator. Everything that any woman would ever want, I would give this woman. I mean, she couldn't have been happier. All she had to do was just do what I told her to do. We went to the Bahamas. We went on wonderful vacations. We had wonderful times together. We prayed together. We had a wonderful physical life together. But as I've looked at it from where I'm looking at it today, it was all based on my giving her everything that I had. I only had one request. You give it all back. And she was going to go back to school. She was going to go to her own AA meeting. She went with me. She wanted to go into therapy, and I said, that's fine. I went to my sponsor, and I said, I don't have to put up with this shit. I'll get me another woman. And to justify that behavior, I had to come up with a whole list of victimizations, didn't I? Because I'd been in AA long enough, not only had it messed up my drinking, but it had messed up my thinking. But I was able to build this wonderful, elaborate pyramid of justification, everything from we're not sexually compatible to where she needs to use different toothpaste and all points in between. And I went on my merry little way, and I got as close to getting drunk as anybody in this room ever got. And I never thought about taking a drink because I wanted what I wanted, didn't I? The only solution I found for me to deal with this kind of thinking, which is what I deal with every day, is a spiritual solution. I've known ever since I was a little boy in the Baptist church that there was a God, and I knew that this God was where peace was, and I knew that this God was love. And what I've known forever that was the solution. The problem is they told me just to believe. Just believe. And I've worked my little ass off trying just to believe, right? It's about the same thing I've watched in people in this program when they're in the middle of an absolute painful set of circumstances and somebody on the back row says, just read 449, except... I'm supposed to accept that my daughter is being screwed by a gorilla out on the back porch. Just accept. For the first time when I came in AA, there was a series of events that could take place that I could follow that would bring me to the logical conclusion of having a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps. No longer did I have to accept anything except I was powerless over alcohol. The rest of the deal came when I followed the process, and the spiritual awakening inevitably occurred. I absolutely am committed to the fact that nobody that ever hears me talk will ever walk out and say ever again that they've never heard how this process works. It's not just how it works for Burns Brady. The reason that they wrote the book to begin with is so we would have a formula. The reasons the traditions were written is so that we would have a way to keep our groups together. And I know from my experience, when I didn't read the book and don't follow the traditions, how crazy I get. And I don't want anybody to ever say they never heard that when they heard me talk, because I think the crisis is that bad. Not for AA, but for that individual. It's his or her life. As I followed this spiritual process, the thing that amazed me was that what Wilson talked about, he says, this program is spiritual. It contains two distinct parts, humility and responsibility. Humility is to believe in a power greater than yourself, and responsibility is to do the job. And I was home. I grew up in a little town in western Kentucky named Mayfield. I grew up in a home where there was no alcohol and no drugs. My grandfather died drinking lye water in the Mayfield City Jail. My mother was molested physically, emotionally, and sexually in that home. They had an interesting way of treating alcoholics in Mayfield in the middle 30s. When my grandfather would get drunk, they'd put him in jail. When he sobered up, they'd put him in a chain gang, and he'd sweep the Mayfield City streets. And my mother walked past her daddy at least once a week, sweeping the Mayfield City streets. She was absolutely ravaged by the disease of alcoholism, and she never took a drink. Our home was absolutely dominated by the disease of alcoholism, and I never saw a drink in that house. The way it came out in our home was, I realized that when I was perfect, Mother would talk to me. When I wasn't perfect, she wouldn't, so I became perfect. I was like Jack Armstrong, the all-American boy. I mean, honest to God, you'd want me as your brother, your husband. I was just wonderful. That's all there was to it, and I knew it. When I was getting ready to leave high school to go to college, I remember laying in bed and I said, Dear God, if I ever have a son, I want him to be just like me. Be careful what you pray for. You may get it. And alcohol and drugs were no problem for me in high school. They were no problem for me in college. I started medical school. Well, I had one little episode in college. I went to college where there was the women's campus on one side of town, the men's campus on the other side of town. And my freshman year, I'd study for the first 5 days of each week and study hard. And then on Saturday, I'd go over to the fraternity house. Hadn't pledged yet, but go over there and they have a keg of beer, and I'd drink the beer. And then we'd get on the back of a flatbed truck and we'd go over to the women's campus and we'd sit out there and sing. And I remember while we were singing, I'd always take off all my clothes and stand there buck naked. Nobody else got naked, just me, you know. And I always like to say nobody sent flowers, nobody sent me cards. I'll tell you who did notice. The dean noticed. And the dean called me into his office and he said, it's a small college. He said, Burns, he said, you're a wonderful student and a nice young man. He said, but when you drink, you get strange. So why don't you quit drinking? So I quit drinking, I quit getting naked, and everybody was happy and it was no problem. But it affected me almost differently from the first drink. Got into medical school and see, I don't know about y'all, but there's always been a motor running in me. Eric talked about it. Each one of the alcoholics you've listened to talk about it. Even the Al-Anon people sometimes, especially the alcoholic. I've always had a motor running in me. Get the A, get the B, get the C, get the D, missed that. Go back. You missed that. See that girl running? Always like that. Always a motor running. See, today they call that, the clinicians call this attention deficit disorder. The psychiatrists call it extreme affective anxiety. And both those are good diagnoses where they are. The big book says it's irritable, restless, and discontent, you know. And it's real critical in alcoholics that we recognize that diagnosis, because those other two require medication many times. And when I get through, you'll understand if you're an alcoholic of my type, you simply can't take most medications. I was packing up my clothes to go home because I couldn't even sleep. I couldn't do anything. A good friend of mine walked in and handed me this little pill called amphetamine, said, take that and see if it'll help you stay awake. I took that and the motor stopped. I found 4 things that'll stop my motor: amphetamine, alcohol, sex, and Alcoholics Anonymous. AA works better. It just takes a little longer. And they've never put me in jail for going to AA meetings. They put me in jail for all 4 of those others. I mean, all 3 of those others. I did not know that was a policewoman, and I thought $50 was a good price. I only did it once. Like Daddy only had 1 beer, right? Why are you standing on your head singing, you know? But I mean, it owned me immediately. 2 weeks before graduation, my senior year in 1962, I was kicked out of medical school. In an amphetamine rage, I hit one of my medicine professors. The head of the department of psychiatry came down and said, Burns, what's wrong with you? And I said, I take too many drugs. He said, do you believe that? And I said, yes, sir. And he said, we can help you. And I said, what are you going to do? He said, we're going to put you in intensive psychiatric therapy. If you can figure out why you take that drug, you can quit. If you figure out why you take that drug, you can quit. In other words, they told me you're going to think yourself into a way of acting. Now, this is called cognitive cause and effect thinking. It works beautifully for daily living. If you don't want to get hit by a bus, don't step in the front of it. If you don't want to get rabies, don't play with a rabid dog. If you don't want to get these other things, don't do them. It doesn't work for treating alcoholism because we are not able to be cognitively intact for about 6 months to 2 years. We are literally playing with sawdust for brains. To be able to try to think ourselves into a way of acting is not possible. Bill Wilson first talked about it in his story. He described what medically we call today the post-acute recovery syndrome. Read in his story. He said for 1.5 years he couldn't get a job because he was racked with waves of self-pity and resentment. In 1979, Medical Science published their findings of studying us, and they said we will lose the power of retentive memory for recent events for 6 months to 2 years. Simple problem solving and stress management. Think about that. Simple problem solving, like, what I eat today? That's a simple problem. And we have trouble with it. You know, what's your name? Must be Fruit of the Loom. It's written in my underwear. You know, that's the way it is. Simple problem solving. Sleep patterns are screwed up. You know, I couldn't sleep for 2 years. I'd come in, I'd say, I can't sleep. And you'd say, hell, nobody died from lack of sleep. Oh, God, you're so cruel, you know. I used to lose my car drinking all the time. I lost my car sober for the first year. I used to drive my car to the office, get out, practice, getting out of the car and drive. One day I drove Casey's car. I parked it, went in, came out, couldn't find my car, went in crying. I cried a lot in that first year. Honest to God, I did. Got my partner and I said, Dave, somebody stole my car. He went out there and looked and he said, Burns, you drove Casey's car. And I said, oh, God, that's right, I forgot. So they assigned me a parking space. And they said, when Burns leaves the office, he's going to that parking space. And if he can get whatever's in it started, he's going to drive it home. When I came back from treatment, I went to see a psychiatrist. I went to church. I came into AA. I would have eaten a bucket of manure, anything to stay sober. I didn't want to ever go back there. I knew I couldn't survive going back there again. I knew it didn't work. I couldn't hate myself that much again. And I'd do anything I was told. I went to see this psychiatrist in 1978, and he put me in therapy on Tuesday and therapy on Thursday, and I'd go into intensive cognitive therapy. And I'd go in there on Thursday, and I'd say, Homer, where do you want to start? And he said, let's start where you were on Tuesday. And I'd say, I don't remember where we were on Tuesday. He'd say, you're blocking your therapy. And I'd go, God, I'm a worm. I'm blocking my therapy, you know. I'd come that night and go into an AA meeting, and I'd say, I'm blocking my therapy. And they'd say, what do you mean, Burns? Well, I'm seeing Homer, and Homer wanted to start with me on Thursday where I was on Tuesday. I couldn't remember where we were on Tuesday, and I'm blocking my therapy. And they said, you remember where his office is? I said, yeah. And they said, hell, you're ahead of the game, man. Don't worry about it. And that's why we say keep it simple. We have to keep it simple, don't we? If y'all ever wondered why you can't think, that's because you got sawdust for brains for about 6 months to 2 years. And there ain't nothing that's going to speed that up. I remember I was talking in Bull Shoals, Arkansas, and I said, look, stick with us. Give it time. One day at a time. Get you sponsored. Do the things you're supposed to. And I swear to God, you'll clear up. Fella sitting back there, about where Bob's sitting, was sitting down with his hat box launched over his eyes, and he was looking at me. He didn't know whether he was going to shoot you or hug you, when you're talking. He came out of that seat. His hat flew off. He said, hallelujah, thank God, I thought I'd lost my mind. And for that whole weekend, he followed me around. If I said, donkeys fly, he'd write down, donkeys fly. He thought I had the truth. Keep it simple, keep it simple, keep it simple. Repetition, repetition, repetition. Keep it simple, keep it simple, keep it simple. Repetition, repetition, repetition. Keep it simple. I do that with those men in that homeless shelter, and they've come to know. I'll see them across the room. I say, what's the mantra? Keep it simple, keep it simple, keep it. I mean, they just chant it because they know they have to, because they can't figure out where their car is. Think yourself into a way of acting. No. After 2 years, they put me back in medical school. Said, I didn't use any amphetamine. Alcohol wasn't a part of my picture. They put me back in medical school, and they said, how do you feel? And I said, I'm scared to death. Why are you scared? They'll be watching me. Should they be watching you? Yes. Why? Because I beat up one of them. Well, that's a reasonable thing for them to do. It's a reasonable feeling for you to have. It's over. You can do it. I walked back in there, and in 30 minutes, I was strung out on amphetamine again. And just sat down and cried because I didn't know why. What did they left out? What we give each other, the spiritual solution. They had given me literally, and I want you to think about this, they had literally walked me through the equivalent of the first 5 steps, because my therapist was a devoutly spiritual individual. But I went to the 4th dimension in your program and my program when I went to the 6th and 7th step. And I'll guarantee you, that's where the rubber hits the road. The first 5 steps require a surrender and some work. Most people are too damn lazy to work, but they'll finally end up working because they're hurting so damn bad. I remember in that deal I was telling you about that I frankly forgot, 9 years or 10 years sober, and I was in this situation I was in with my wife, and I was sitting there and I was trying to work it out, and I went through 4 4th steps and 5th steps in 1 month. And my sponsor finally looked at me and said, Burns, you're just getting to be a pain in the ass. Why don't you go to the 6th and 7th step? And I didn't know how. It finally came one day driving back from Cincinnati. I haven't told this story, I guess, in ages. But I was coming back across from Cincinnati. My boy was up there in school. And I went up to see him. He was in college, and he took me back down to drive across that bridge to go from Cincinnati back to Louisville. And as he peeled off to go back downtown, I just started crying, thinking, God, thank you for my children. Thank you for taking their lives and putting them in AA. Thank you. And then I screamed, what do you want me to do? What do you want me to do? And over the next 90 miles, not one single original thought came in my mind, but every one of them seemed to fall in their tumblers. And by the time I got home, I called Jack S., who was my sponsor at that time, and I said, Jack, God wants me to go to southeast Georgia and meet with 3 people down there who had a combined sobriety of 105 years. C.D. and Ida C. from Statesboro, Georgia, and Dot M., old Dr. John's widow. And I called Al, their son, and I went down there and spent 4 days working with those 3 people, and how to make amends and how to clean up the mess. I graduated from medical school in 64. Classmates enabled me to take me home, put me to bed when I get too hot, and I finally got out. And I was married and had 1 small child. My wife would call and make multiple excuses to medical school. They knew better, but they didn't know what to do. Graduated in 64. Between 64 and 67, I was in Our Lady of Peace 4 times, strapped down, IV fluid, straight jackets, padded cells. I might stay off amphetamine 6 days, 6 hours, 6 weeks, 6 months. Went back, and it would own me just like that. I'd go in the mental hospital. Went in the Army in 67 and almost got put in Leavenworth for taking amphetamine. Came home in 69. Got back on it because I'd stayed off a year before I got home because they put me in Leavenworth. They told me they would if I kept taking it. And had my gallbladder taken out, and my surgeon and my internist came down with 2 members of the board of licensure, and they sat beside my bed, and we held hands and prayed. And they said, Burns, you're a good doctor and a good man. This amphetamine's killing you. Please quit. So I quit. My last amphetamine was 1969 or 1970. I'm not sure which one. I didn't quit because I was powerless over amphetamine. Never even thought I was powerless over amphetamine. Never even gave it much of a thought. But I've looked at it many times. I didn't quit because I thought I was powerless. I quit because of the consequences. That wasn't going to be true of alcohol. When I quit alcohol, I was dead ass powerless. But I never even considered I was powerless over amphetamine. I didn't even have time to check it out anyway, did I? Because I started drinking almost immediately. First 4 years of my drinking wasn't alcoholic. I might get drunk, might stay sober. Next 3 years of my drinking was alcoholic. Every minute of every day was when did I get my next drink. I knew I was walking out of that office at 4 o'clock, and I was going to have my first drink at 4:15. It's going to be a quart bottle of beer sold at the 7-Eleven across from my office. I was going to put it between my legs, drive the outer loop, about a 25-mile trip home, and by the time I got home, I'd have that quart of beer drunk. Then I'd go and get my scotch and water because I'd get down to some serious drinking. The last year of my drinking, I drank addictively, and I drank a quart of whiskey a night. And don't ever confuse addiction with alcoholism. They're not the same. I don't have time to explain all that to you. If you ever want to know, just call me at home and I'll tell you. But don't confuse addiction with alcoholism, because I had severe alcoholism long before I was addicted to alcohol. But in the last year of my drinking, I was addicted to alcohol, and I drank a quart of whiskey a night. Told myself I wasn't an alcoholic because I never drank in my office. And I had to believe it, didn't I? My wife kicked me out of the house in 1975. I womanized and ran hot and heavy for about 1 year, and then met Casey, and I thought this is the greatest thing God ever made. And quite honestly, she's pretty close. And we got together, and because the divorce was dragging off, we moved in and lived with each other for almost a year and a half. And I realized what a special lady this was, and I knew if I didn't quit drinking, I'd run her off. I'd run everybody else off with my drinking, and I didn't want to run her off. So I thought, I've got to do something about my drinking. So the first thing I did was I quit drinking scotch and water. I drank beer. And all that did was bloat me and make me pee, and it didn't work. Then I went to wine. That didn't work because it made me sick. I couldn't stand the syrupy taste of it. Then one night I drank 24 martinis because everybody talked about what a wonderful drink martini was, and I drank 24 martinis and didn't even faze me. Next day I drank a bottle of beer and couldn't walk for almost 3 days. That's alcoholism. That particular morning, Casey had gone to work, and at the end of my drinking, I was so delusional that I had figured out that if I never went to bed, I'd never have to get up. If I never got up, then I would never have to start the next day. So I would come home and I'd get my quart of whiskey at night and sit down on the floor for the last 6 months of my drinking. I put on the Mormon Tabernacle Choir, the Philadelphia Philharmonic Orchestra doing the Battle Hymn of the Republic. And I'd play that for about 6 hours, take it off, put on Neil Diamond's I Am, I Cried. And when he said, I am, I cried, I go, God, I know what you mean, Neil, I know what you mean. And finally that morning, and each morning about 7 or 8 o'clock, I would finally just slip off into sleep. I didn't pass out. I'd just be so tired I'd slip off into sleep. And that morning I woke up, Casey had gone to work, and I was looking out at the sun, and I knew it was over. I didn't know what to do, but I knew it was over. I couldn't stand me. I couldn't stand the looks in my children's eyes. I couldn't stand the looks in my parents' eyes. I couldn't stand the looks in Casey's eyes. I couldn't stand the look in my partner's eyes. But most of all, I hated my guts, and I couldn't stand the lying. I said, God, you got to help me. This gets real personal. You don't have to believe all this, my conclusions. But I said, God, you got to help me. And immediately I knew what to do, and the peace was measurable. I mean, it was incredible. And I walked into my bedroom and loaded my shotgun and put it in my mouth. I was not scared of dying. I was terrified of living, and it was time to go. I couldn't stop drinking. I couldn't live with it, and I couldn't live without it. People over the years said, do you think that's where God led you? I have no doubt. Every alcoholic will reach a moment of clarity. I've dealt with thousands of alcoholics. I have been blessed to deal with thousands of alcoholics. Every alcoholic I've ever dealt with one day has to make the decision. You want to live or you want to die? And let me tell you why that's so critical in Alcoholics Anonymous today. Some of us are bitching about the insurance companies, saying that they're not going to be treating alcoholism like they should. They're treating exactly like they should. Because you know what's going to happen? Where are they coming? They're coming home. They're coming to Alcoholics Anonymous. And you know what our message should be to them? So that they hear it real clear? You're going to die. Read the book, 7th chapter, Working with Others, 12th step. You're going to die. As a doctor, I don't have a solution. When I was practicing medicine, all I could do was write a prescription, hand it to them, and say, if they needed detoxed, I did it. Hand them a prescription and say, go to AA. And have a name of a person to call and contact in AA and a telephone number. As an alcoholic, I've got a hell of a solution for you. As a doctor, I didn't have one. I am absolutely right here, whether your reaction to it is basically immaterial to me. What I'm saying is I'm challenging every alcoholic in this room to be ready with the right message when they come. And if you don't know the right message, by God, it's time you learned it. And I'm going to take it one step further. If that pisses anybody off, then get with your sponsor and read the book and figure out why it's pissing you off. Because if you figure out why it's pissing you off, you're going to go to the next plateau of recovery. And that's just as good as being ready for the drunk who comes home. You say, what right have I got to do that? 19 years of intense, loving participation in AA. I probably will be a lot gentler when I'm 25 years sober, but right now gentle doesn't seem to be a lot of time in my life. Tolerant and loving, yes. Gentle, no. Not where lives are at stake. Not at all. People ask me why I didn't pull the trigger, and the reason I didn't pull the trigger was at that moment of complete self-absorption, all I could think of was I do not want my children to know their daddy died this way, and I do not want my wife or Casey to walk in here and see the back of my head missing. At that moment of complete self-absorption, I was able to think of somebody else. I crawled to the phone, was sent off to treatment, came back to Louisville, walked into AA, and I said, what have I got to do to stay sober? You said, you do anything we tell you to do, you're going to act yourself into a way of thinking. 180 degrees difference. AA is so profound, it's incredible. Knew exactly what to do. Said, don't drink, go to meetings. If you get a chance, read the big book. Don't drink. I thought, why do they beat the hell out of that? And I put on Sandy Beach's tape, and it said every time he got drunk, it was a direct result of drinking. I thought, my God, the man's a genius. He's figured the whole damn thing out. Go to meetings, and I'm condensing this because time is over and I'm going to close it down because there are other things. I've wandered a lot and said some things I needed to say for me today and said some things I wanted you to hear, whether you wanted to hear them or not. It may not be what God wanted you to, but that's okay. He'll make me gentler and he may piss you off enough to do something about it. But in any event, meetings. First thing I found out about meetings is this is a perfect program composed of an awful lot of imperfect people. And Wilson knew what he was talking about when he said principles over personalities. When I came into AA, there were people trying to get my wife in bed, and I understood that because she's a good-looking woman. I didn't appreciate it, but I understood it. There were people trying to get me in bed, and that just was goofy as hell to me because even I didn't want to sleep with me. I mean, it was awful. I mean, I had little bitty legs and little bitty arms and a pot belly and pock marks on my face. Alcohol had ravaged me, and people trying to take me to bed. And I thought, you got to be kidding me. Hell, even my right hand was dodging about that time, you know. And I need to say this for any newcomer, do not ever let any personality deter you from remaining here and staying with the principles. Because I got to tell you, if you want to find the winners, find us. What I found was the people who wanted to take me out to have coffee, I said, why do you want to take me out to have coffee? And they said, because we want to stay sober and we want to help you stay sober. And I found the winners. And find one of us. Find the winners. Don't ask us to walk on water because we don't know where the stumps are either. But we'll give you the best we got. Get a support group. Do as I do. Get a home group. Basically, personalities are fallible. I could get drunk. I could get drunk tomorrow. You can bet your farm I'm not going to get drunk today, but I could get drunk tomorrow. And if your whole life is assimilated in me, that's not what this recovery is about. We give you role models, but we're not perfect. But find the winners, those of us who go to meetings and have sponsors and talk the book and talk the steps. I also found out that them that don't go to meetings don't hear what happens to them that don't go to meetings. And that's really important. Sit down and read the big book, and I couldn't read it, couldn't remember it. Finally, I thought, how does it work? I guess I won't be able to get it if I can't read it. And I looked in there and said, how does it work? And there, in that first paragraph, 3 times honesty. Anybody can make it if they can be honest, and people who aren't honest can't make it. It's that simple. And with all the people I've worked with, the ones who don't make it are those who can't be honest. When I went into treatment, I was begging to go into treatment, sitting in front of the guy running the treatment center, and he looked at me and said, how much do you drink? And I said, I drink a 6-pack of beer every night. He said, you're lying. And I said, I know it. I do it all the time. Why not do that, you know? As the years unfolded, my first year was crazy. Second year was crazy. The 5th year, I came to know a God that loves me just as I am. Then I went through the series of other events that I've told you about. I had a heart attack 2 years ago and almost died. And I'll tell this story because I think it's very important to tell it. I really hadn't planned to, interestingly enough, but I've done a lot of things today I hadn't planned to do. But that's okay. Somebody needed to hear it, maybe just me. I had a heart attack and almost died, and they took me in, and I was in severe pain, and I'll never forget the guy in the emergency room looked at me and said, I knew him. He said, Burns, you're having an anterior septal heart attack. I said, I know. And he said, who's your cardiologist? And I thought, you idiot. It's anybody out in the hall's my cardiologist. I don't give a shit who you get, you know. Even at that moment, I thought, this guy's nuts. And they come in there, about that time I pass out, and I don't know what happened when I come to. It happened to be a fellow I know was one of the top cardiologists in the city of Louisville, just happened to be there. And he rushed in, started doing these things, and I woke up and I said, Dan, what happened? He said, you fibrillated and I had to put the electric shocker on you. I said, oh, okay. So we were talking, by this time I had enough morphine in me that, I was becoming analytical by now, And so I'm sitting there and I'm saying, Dan, I'm getting dizzy again. He said, yeah, you're fibrillating again. I can't wait for you to pass out. I'm going to have to put them on you awake. He laid them suckers on my chest. I went, God damn, that hurts. You ought to get shocked sometime when you're awake. It's what you said. I came this high up off the table and I'm looking at him and he's looking at me and my eyes are about this. Hell, his eyes are about this big around, And I come down and he said, I know it hurt, but I had to do it. I said, no, you keep doing it, but I got to tell you, it hurts. So they put me up in a unit, and they couldn't do the things they had to do, and they finally, because the thing they do to perfuse your heart screws up your clotting mechanism, and I had to wait 8 days to have my cath and the bovie out in my artery, and they had me on IV Ativan, which is Turbo-Valium. And I called in an addictionologist or an addictionist like I am, a person specialized in this field, because I knew what trouble it was going to get me into. But I also knew I needed to have it. And the cardiologist said, Burns, you really need to have that. And I said, Dan, I'm not telling you to stop that. I just want Charlie to come in and monitor me because I'm going to be in trouble when I get out of here if I'm still alive. He said, okay. So they monitored me and whatnot. And when they got out, Charlie gave my wife some Ativan capsules to taper me on. And on the third day, I went into severe withdrawal. Now, in retrospect, it's real obvious what it was because as she tapered me down the first 3 days, you give decreasing doses for about 15 days. It's a recognized way to do it. If you got somebody that knows what they're doing, can give the medicine and can control it. And my wife was sitting there in a bedroom, and I walked over, and this wasn't clandestine. Her purse was sitting there. She's sitting in the chair looking at me, and I pick up her purse on the third day, take out 20 of these pills, and take them. And she looks at me, and I didn't know what she said. I saw her mouth moving. What she said is, what the hell are you doing? And I don't remember what I said, but I remember saying something. What I said was, this stuff's screwing me up. When I get it all taken, I won't have to take any more. Then what I do remember is walking right straight over and sitting down on the foot of the bed and saying, tomorrow, this medicine will wear off and I'll have to go write a prescription to get some more. And she looked at me and I looked at her and I started crying. I said, it's got me. She says, it's got you. We called the doctor. He put me in Our Lady of Peace and I went through a 7-day bone-rattling detox. 17 years sober. There aren't a handful of people in this country that know what I know about alcoholism with my experience. Absolutely committed. Once they detox me, never have one. I wouldn't touch an Ativan on a dare. It's not the kind of pill I want, but I was hooked in 7 days. You know what my story is? Each of us has a unique story. Amphetamine for 12 years, no alcohol, no Ativan. Alcohol for 8 years, no amphetamine, no Ativan. Ativan for 8 days, no alcohol, no amphetamine. Each one of them owned my ass in a heartbeat. The message is, if you're an alcoholic of my type, you can't take mood-altering medicine. If you have to take it, you get a doctor who is an addictionist, who knows what to do, who can monitor your medicine. Everything I've ever had, kidney stones, they gave me Demerol. Heart attack, they gave me Ativan. I had a vasectomy under local, and that was a dumb damn thing to do, I'll tell you that. If I had that to do, I guarantee if I had that to do over again, that'd be different. I knew about 2 seconds into that I'd made a real error in judgment. And I'd been sober for 3 months, and I called I mean, hell, I had what's called orthostatic hypotension. I couldn't stand up for 3 days. Every time I tried to get up, I'd pass out. So I told my sponsor, and he came over to see me, and I said, Jim, I did a good thing. I didn't take any medicine. I had this vasectomy under local. He said, you're an idiot. He said, the message is you don't just not take medicine. You just have somebody around who can help you make decisions about taking the medicine, and it can help you get off of it when you got to get off of it. Hell of a message. I've watched people in Alcoholics Anonymous try to do the right thing and damn near run the risk of losing their lives. I never even considered not taking the medicine. I just had a net, didn't I? And it caught me, didn't it? And I'm okay today. Final thing I'll tell you is my family, my daughter and my son are both sober today because they said their daddy's sobriety was the thing that changed their lives. There's a lot more to that story, but I don't have enough time. Final story has to do with my daddy. My mama died in 1978. I made a commitment to God and to my family and to Alcoholics Anonymous that I'd never leave this story out. My mama died in 1978 of breast cancer. I had 8 months of sobriety and saw her every weekend, and she met Casey, and I made my amends, and my mama and I were so close. I think of her every day today. She is was a wonderful lady, goofy as a goat, but boy, was she a neat lady. She was so loving and so gentle and so ravaged, but what a neat lady. Tried to make my amends to my father about that time, and Daddy wouldn't talk to me. My daddy was always the kind of man, never say I love you, never say a word. He was just always there. Every time anything happened to me, my daddy would just appear. I broke my leg playing football, and he was the first one to put me on a stretcher. Broke it playing basketball, first one to put me on a stretcher. When I had to be put in Our Lady of Peace the second time, I barricaded the house with a shotgun, ran my wife and children out, and my daddy drove 250 miles and just appeared. It was the only one I'd let in the house. I respected this man so much, but I always wanted him to say, Burns Mac, it's okay. And I'd try to make my amends, and he'd say, I don't want to talk about it. And I know today why, and I can't tell you. But in any event, he wouldn't talk about it. I've worked with hundreds of men, and every man I've ever worked with has always wanted their daddy to say it's okay. Some significant male say it's okay. And I'll bet you with the women, it's the same thing. Daddy wouldn't do it. Daddy then began to lose, well, he married another lady, a beautiful lady, a good friend of mother's and daddy's, and God, one of God's great gifts to my daddy. And then he began to lose his mind. It's not Alzheimer's. It looks like Alzheimer's. It's called senile psychosis or pre-senile dementia. He forgot who I was, he forgot who my brother was, then he forgot that Mother was ever alive. Finally, Peggy and I had to put him in a nursing home, and I'd drive down every weekend or close to every weekend to see my daddy, and all the way down I'd say, God, take away my pain. Please just take away my pain. And I'd drive up there and I'd do with Daddy, and I'd come home and never work. This one Sunday, I drove up and I parked my car, and I'll never forget it. I looked out the window, I said, Dear God, let me be for my daddy what you want me to be. I walked in, I didn't call him Daddy because that confused him. He was sitting in a wheelchair, and I said, Hal, can I help you? And he said, yeah, Buster. He thought I was one of his brothers, Uncle Buster. He said, yeah, Buster, would you shave me? So I shaved Daddy. I said, would you like to go in there and have some lunch? And he said, I believe I would, Buster. And I rolled him in there, and he was too weak to feed himself. I fed him. Then Peggy came in and sat down, and Peggy and I were sitting there talking. Mom and I used to do this for years, and Daddy would always just sit and watch Mother and me talk. He was sitting there in that wheelchair watching Peggy and me talk. I tried. I said, Hal, would you like to go out on the porch? He said, I believe I would, Buster. And I rolled him out on the porch, and Peggy and I sat there and got to talking again. And Daddy's sitting in that chair watching us talk, and he raised up in that chair. He looked me right straight in the face, and he said, Son, today you're just like the little boy your mom and I raised. I love you very much. Thank you for coming to see me. 10 seconds later, he didn't know who I was, and we buried him 2 years ago, and he never knew who I was again. The miracle of Alcoholics Anonymous is not that my daddy recognized me, is it? The miracle of Alcoholics Anonymous is that this self-centered drunk said, Dear God, let me be for my daddy what you want me to be. And that's Alcoholics Anonymous. It's good to see so many of my old friends. It's good to meet some new ones. And for those of you I didn't get to meet, we will meet as we trudge this road of happy destiny. I love you, and I thank you for loving me.